Hello friends, let's start our manhwa. I surrender my position as Empress Part 5. In the previous video, Empress destroyed the monster tower alone, and all the knights, magicians and Minister Lionel are stunned. Now Empress Adele went back to her Empress Palace after defeating Tower. Mrs. Kicks, she is worried for Empress and wonder how did Tower suddenly disappear in thin air. Then she hears sound of footsteps. She turned around and saw Empress Adele came back. She asked, "Your Majesty, where did you go and from where did you got this dresses?" And she was worried about her. Empress Adele informed her that she went to destroy Tower. Mrs. Kicks gets startled. She asked what Your Majesty, but then suddenly Empress collapsed on floor. Mrs. Kicks panicked. Meanwhile, the nobility whispered rumors of a different ilk, their tongues wagging in hushed tones. "Do you mean to say that Her Majesty single-handedly destroyed the tower?" one noblewoman asked incredulously. "By the gods, are you implying that the Empress is a wizard herself? She flew into the sky and obliterated the tower with her own two hands. What madness is this?" one person said. "I know," people agreed with him. "Could it have been destroyed before the tower even touched the ground? And what does that make her? A striker, perhaps?" The Duke of Spun is undoubtedly attempting to enslave the Empress, but to think that she destroyed the tower all on her own. Is her class not higher than that of Lennox Poitiers? Strange indeed, agreed. And what if the Empress were to accept Duke de Spun's offer? To be subservient to a group that includes Diane Poitiers' brother, Lennox Poitiers? What would that entail for their relationship? One person said, "Why would Gotrov send a princess, one who is such a powerful wizard, to Amont?" The group fell into a contemplative silence, mulling over the question at hand. Lionel pushed back the locks that obscured his eyes and gazed up at the clear blue sky. The memory of the fiery red hue that had adorned the heavens mere moments ago felt like a distant dream hallucination. The warm gusts of late summer wind stirred the air, carrying with them a handful of leaves that had prematurely shed from the trees of autumn. "It's level 4, which is close to level 5. So I don't have to wait." Her words echoed in his mind, crystal clear as if etched onto his brain. Lionel had tried to catch her as she fell, but all he had felt was the weight of her thin, fragile shoulders in his palms before her powerful magic had pushed him away. The sight of her was more overwhelming than any disaster he had ever witnessed. Flames that poured like molten gold, eyes that glinted with a fierce light that surpassed even the fire, and black hair that cascaded down like a waterfall. She is indeed an outstanding one. Meanwhile, Duke de Spun had rushed to the magician's official residence and burst through the door. He shouts, "Lennox!" At the sound of the Duke's voice, Lennox Poitiers quickly emerged. "Your Excellency, the Duke." Duke de Spun turned to Lennox and spoke in a hushed and urgent tone. "You are saying that the Empress is a wizard?" His face betrayed his anxiety and displeasure at encountering an unexpected twist. Lennox simply nodded. "That's correct." Duke asked, "Is it true that she destroyed the tower alone, without any other wizard's help?" Lennox hesitated for a moment before replying, "Yes, that's correct." Duke de Spun frowned and took a step back, mind working furiously to calculate the implications of this newfound knowledge. He spoke again. "The Empress is a wizard. She is an amazing person." Lennox, his confident demeanor shattered in an instant as he watched the tower collapse before his eyes. And then the impossible happened. The one who had single-handedly destroyed the tower was none other than the Empress herself. Lennox was taken aback. He had never imagined that the Empress, who had been married off to the Emperor as if she were a mere pawn, would turn out to be a wizard, let alone a striker. It was a revelation that would have caught even the Emperor off guard. "Truly remarkable. You are a great talent." The Empress Gotrov neglected to mention something rather important. Duke de Spun's voice was cold and grim, his long platinum hair sweeping across his face. Lennox couldn't shake off the ominous feeling that crept up his spine, causing goosebumps to form on his skin and beads of sweat to run down his back. Something told him that this was just the beginning of an unpredictable and perilous journey. Lennox wasted no time once the Duke had departed. sprinting towards the ivory palace with determination etched into his features. He barged in room and shouted Diana. Diana, who was sitting in her room, looked at him and said, "Brother, how many times I have told you to knock on door." "Are you still not pregnant?" he asked, causing Diane to recoil. "Please, stop saying that. Do you think pregnancy is something that can be forced?" she exclaimed. "What are you going to do now?" Lennox demanded. "What am I supposed to do?" Diane retorted. "The Empress is a wizard," Lennox snarled, his face contorted with anger. Diane's eyes widened in shock at the revelation. "Is the Empress a wizard?" she asked. "Indeed," Lennox confirmed, "and she's the one who caused the tower to disappear." Diane closed her eyes in dismay, unable to believe what she was hearing. It was all so unexpected, and she felt powerless to do anything about it. In that moment, she felt like nothing more than a mere puppet being pulled this way and that. She thought Empress Adele is mere puppet, and she can manipulate her. Duke de Spun said he was a great talent. "What if he see me as worthless?" Lennox asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Diane sneered at her brother's words, her anxiety mounting. "If my brother was brought here, it's because he has potential," she replied. "Stop doubting yourself and start protecting the wizards." "I'll protect you. Nothing has changed. You have always been best mages in Emont. Don't waver. Get your head straight up and take care of Magic Division, and I will take care of His Majesty." Lennox's expression softened at Diane's words, and he began to feel a sense of calm creeping over him. "You're right," he said softly. Lennox nodded in agreement. "And besides, even if you're not pregnant, the king is still wrapped around your finger, isn't he?" he said, trying to lighten the mood. "Stop saying that," Diane protested, "and please be careful." Lennox grinned at her. "Of course. You know me," he said, as they stared at each other. He said, "Of course, after all, Empress is alone, what she can do." Diane's expression grew dark. "We've endured so much already, only to be brought low by this. It's not fair," she said bitterly. She said, "Have faith, brother," Diane said, her voice a low murmur that seemed to vibrate with power. "It doesn't matter if the Empress is a wizard or not. In the end, we will be the last ones laughing. The world may take and take, but we will always have each other." Scene shift to Empress Palace. After defeating the monster tower without anyone's help, Adele is called Bravado. The tower was the epicenter of magic, and its absence would cause the mana to dissipate, unleashing untold chaos. Adele pushed herself to the limit. She slept as if she were dead, groaning in agony as if her body had been battered. Mrs. Kix watched the Empress contort and make strange noises with a worried expression etched on her face. Though Adele's forehead didn't feel hot to the touch, Mrs. Kix couldn't shake her concerns. She left the room, knowing full well what the Empress was up to. And soon others learned of it too. The palace was in turmoil, abuzz with rumors of the Empress destroying the tower alone. Gossip and whispers spread like wildfire, and everyone seemed to be in on the secret. I said, "She did it alone," someone exclaimed in disbelief. "It's true. The guards are practically bursting with excitement," another said. "What about the other mage?" someone else asked. "Late to the party. I heard the Empress arrived after the tower was already destroyed." Yet another voice chimed in. "If not for Her Majesty, the royal guard would have suffered great losses," someone else added. Mrs. Kix quickly drafted a letter and handed it to one of her trusted aides. "Take this to His Highness the Grand Duke immediately," she commanded, her tone brooking no arguments. "Go quickly while chaos still reigns in the palace." As the Emperor stood lost in thought, his eyes fixed on the ominous black tower against the blood-red sky, the imperial palace suddenly erupted into chaos, but he remained calm, knowing that a tower of that size could be easily taken down. His aide informed him that the tower is coming, Your Majesty. Please hurry up and evacuate. Emperor replied, "Shut up, and stop making a big deal out of it." He thought it's a no big deal to take care to tower of that size. Perhaps he could order its destruction at the right time. As he pondered his options, a strange feeling washed over him. It was as if the wind had died down and the sky had faded to a lighter shade of red. And there, it was a brilliant white tower crumbling before his eyes. He thought, the wizards had done it. But the news that reached him soon after was nothing like what he expected. What? Who destroyed the tower? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. It is said that Her Majesty the Empress destroyed it alone, came the answer. The Emperor was stunned into silence. He stared down at his hand, still tingling from the shock of electricity that had coursed through it when he gripped the Empress' shoulder. All information he had been given was the gender and name of the late Empress of Gotrovas's daughter, but now he had to wonder. It is possible that the Empress Dowager of Gotrov had sent her daughter away to Ichmont because she couldn't handle the responsibility? Determined to find out the truth, he summoned the shadow responsible for his secret work. Go to Gotrov, he commanded. Find out about Princess Adelaide's track record. His aide bowed and replied, I understand, Your Majesty. Scene shifts back to Empress Palace. Mrs. Kix came to visit Empress Adele and ask about her well-being. Are you awake, Your Majesty? How are you feeling? She saw Empress and her eyes widen. As the first rays of sunlight peeked through the window, Empress Adelaide stirred from her slumber. The rumors about her latest decision had spread like wildfire throughout the city, and she knew it was time to take action. With a determined air, she ordered her attendants to stir up the still unquiet capital once more. I shall issue an aid notice, she declared, her voice firm and resolute. Mrs. Kick's face instantly lightened up. Empress continued. The eligibility criteria are unmarried men over the age of 20, except if they have a fiancé. The selection process shall be conducted through interviews, and the number of chosen candidates is yet to be determined. Mrs. Kix asked, and what shall be the selection criteria, Your Majesty? Adelaide paused for a moment, her gaze sweeping across the room. Only my heart, she finally replied, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. Mrs. Giggs closed her eyes and bowed respectfully to the Empress, who smiled enchantingly, pleased with her faithful servant's response. The imperial capital's upper echelons were abuzz with the news of the Empress's call for aids. The mere act of recruiting assistants was enough to pique everyone's interest, but the fact that the Empress herself, a formidable striker who had shattered the tower just the day before, had issued the announcement had the nobles on the edge of their seats. Prince Baldur was no exception. What is this announcement all about? Why the requirement is so simple? Michael Rosen, the Duke's chief secretary, mused as he perused a single document, swiping back and forth over it. Theseus sighed, his shoulders drooping. He spoke, it's actually better than a detailed one. But, Your Grace, Michael pressed on, don't you think this is rather vague? Theseus rubbed his temples and pursed his lips. He said, what's Her Majesty's intention? Is the Empress looking to challenge Her Majesty's rule or to establish her own power base against Diane Poitiers? He pondered aloud. He looked up at his younger brother, Lionel, who was sitting across from him, his arms folded and eyes fixed on the announcement. Lionel, what do you think? Theseus called out to him, hoping to get his opinion. Lionel turned his gaze toward his brother, his deep blue eyes meeting Theseus's. I don't know, I don't think it either. Or maybe she just wants to have some fun and pick someone she likes, because the selection requirement is someone I like, the Duke's secretary interjected. Theseus said, regardless, the Empress has put out a call for aids, and we cannot ignore it. Whom should we entrust with this task? Secretary speaks. Who could be entrusted with the crucial task of serving as the Empress's aide, with the under attack from the Emperor? Finding a trustworthy individual to assist the Empress was of the utmost importance. The chosen candidate would need to meet a specific set of requirements: a close bond with the Baldur family, approval from the Empress, the ability to devise a plan to challenge the Emperor's power while serving as an aide, being an unmarried man over the age of 20 without a fiancé, and the fortitude to endure the inevitable loss of honor that comes with such a position, called Empress lover, and that's why, for generations, the Empress aides have always been the second or third sons of powerful families. Breaking the silence, Lionel spoke out of turn. Her Majesty gave Count Calvin a gold bar. His Majesty must have been very displeased, he said, his words seeming to have no connection to the topic at hand. Perplexed, Theseus asked, "What do you mean, Lionel?" "It's an aid notice from the Empress," Lionel replied, his voice steady and calm. "Perhaps Her Majesty's view of the tower is different from the current wizards." Theseus asks, "Do you have someone to recommend?" Lionel replied, "I will apply for myself." Theseus gets startled. He replied, "What? No, you should think again." Lionel asked from secretary, "Do you have someone suitable enough to recommend?" "I don't think so." Secretary replied, "Well, I think the three sons of Count Verdi are quite close in age." Theseus stated, nonchalantly, "The youngest hasn't even reached 20 yet." Theseus began to protest. "There's nothing for you to gain by going. The Empress is bringing in her aide to impress Her Majesty and to send a warning to Diane Poitiers. Everyone will talk behind you for being her lover." Lionel countered, "As I have any honor left behind, to ruin it, we can't recede any more. Just yesterday that Lennox Poitiers intentionally dawdled around despised my order for backup. However, I can't complain about that at Magic Division, even though in the Minister of Defense." Theseus glared at Michael before Michael continued, "Lionel has a point. We know very little about the wizards, towers, and witch beasts that are plaguing Emont. Even our attempts to steal information from other countries have failed due to it being a national secret, and we lost a person when we sent them to Gotrov. The Empress likely knows more than we do, and by becoming her aide, Lionel could gain valuable information to help us move forward." Theseus took a sip of his cold tea and furrowed his brow as he considered his brother's argument. Lionel continued, "At least if I become the Empress aide, we can take a step forward." Theseus, please say yes so that these two lovebirds can be together and we viewers can be at peace. Theseus said, "All right, the Empress aide." Theseus couldn't help but feel uneasy about the situation and lamented, "If our mother were still alive, she would have slapped me for letting you do this." Lionel smiles and said, "I will take it as you allowed me." Michael posed an important question. He said, "Sorry to interrupt you, but what if the Empress doesn't choose Lionel? I wonder why both of you are so confident about it." Both Baldir brothers gave Michael death stare. He nervously replied, "Of course, there is no reason still to reject you. It's Lionel Baldir after all. Please dress nicely when you go to Her Majesty." Scene shifts to Emperor Palace. As Diane gazed upon Carl, her heart sank at his preoccupation with her paperwork. It had been an entire day since their last encounter, which had taken place at the Empress Palace. Anxiety shimmered in Diane's cerulean eyes as she struggled to keep her composure. Cold sweat dripped down her spine, and she took a deep breath as chills coursed through her chest. Carl saw Diana's face and he suggested, "If you're tired, you should go rest at the palace. You don't have to be here." She replied, "I apologize for worrying you, Your Majesty. I heard that the Empress has issued an announcement to hire an aide." Diane said cautiously, choosing her words carefully. "It hasn't been even a month since she got married, but now she is trying to hire one in less than a month. I can't help but worried it could be a problem for Your Majesty." Carl cut her off abruptly, his tone icy. "It's nothing for you to worry about, just focus on your duties." Diane blinked in surprise, taken aback by the Emperor's dismissive tone, and he only met her with a cold gaze, leaving her feeling perplexed. She then turned around and said, "Then now I will excuse myself, Your Majesty." Emperor said, "Take a proper care of the Empress Palace budget revision, so that no more commotion is caused from it." Hearing Emperor words, her steps unsteady, and tears streaming down her face. She felt a deep sadness, knowing that Carl was both her heaven and her hell, In this moment, she felt cast into hell by the Emperor's cold eyes, tone, attitude, and every word. It was all too easy for him to turn her world into a paradise, only to then plunge it into despair so painfully. I hope now she understand the difference between wife and mistress. As Karl sat in his chambers, his emotions roiled like crashing waves, threatening to consume him. He call his aide order him, report to me the current situation about Her Majesty's aide recruitment. Aide replied, yes, Your Majesty. Then after few times aide report him, currently, there are 16 applicants. Baron Armand's firstborn, Viscount Belvitz. Emperor thought, it was only made this morning, yet the response has been swift and overwhelming. He couldn't help but smile wryly at the eagerness with which families sent their children to vie for the prestigious position of the Empress aide. He knew the Empress' magical prowess had drawn much attention, and he wondered how the dynamics of the court would shift with her new aide. He asked, is there anyone from Baldir family? Aide replied, currently no one. Emperor said, report me immediately if you got any new news about it. There is no way Duke Valgier or the Minister of Defense will personally apply for it. Thus, they will send someone from a family related to them. Scene shifts to Empress Palace. Hannah Giggs, known for her encyclopedic knowledge, Hannah's insight was invaluable, and she didn't hesitate to share her thoughts, and that concludes my report introducing the core politics of each mont. Empress is amazed from Mrs. Kick's knowledge. She praised her. She said, no wonder the lady favored you, you're indeed amazing. Mrs. Kicks replied, I am grateful, Your Majesty. While looking at report, Empress said, considering the current circumstances, it would be wise to extend an invitation to the Balder family. Empress put down the report and said, anyway, now shall we start interviewing the applicants for my aide? As the doors of the Empress Palace opened to officially begin the interviews, the nervous interviewers lined up to meet Her Majesty. First applicant arrived. He opened his mouth and said, Your Majesty the Empress, the moment I met you, I couldn't believe my eyes. If there is an angel, this is it. I thought so, gushed one of the candidates, overwhelmed by Adele's presence. Me, an angel? My nickname was the Witch of Gotrov, Adele thought. Applicant 2. It's such an honor to meet you, Your Majesty. I couldn't even look at your face, so I lowered my head and only saw the tips of your toes. I'm so nervous. This moment feels like a dream, stammered another candidate, struggling to contain their awe. I feel like I'm in a dream too, Adele said, trying to keep her composure. Another candidate interjected enthusiastically, I am really strong, Your Majesty. Another one said, Your Majesty, my specialty is singing. Would you like to hear it? Empress screamed in her thought, no, please stop. After the last candidate left, Adele slumped onto the sofa, exhausted. She thought, that's why paperwork is necessary for process. There isn't a single applicant who can understand my announcement meaning. She thought an applicant from Baldir family hasn't shown up yet. Mrs. Kick said to Empress, if you are tired, should I send them back? Empress replied, it's almost over, isn't? Mrs. Kick, yes indeed. Empress continued, please guide them in. I think it would be better to wrap things as quickly as possible and then rest afterward. Mrs. Kicks went outside and called next applicant. She was shocked. A man in a sleek black suit had entered, drawing everyone's attention. His jet black hair and piercing blue eyes caught the light, and the badge on his chest, featuring crossed swords and a black panther, demanded respect. It was Lionel Baldir. Now, my dear friends, I know you must be wondering why Duke de Spun is in charge of the magic division and why the Emperor wants his side. Actually, Duke de Spun is also a magician, and why he didn't fight against Monster Tower. His thinking is similar, like Empress Adele's mother, who wants to hold highest authority, and wanted to be seen as godlike figure among humans, and want to look down on everyone else. Well, now our manhwa ends here. Thank you, my friends, subscribing to this channel. I hope you understand my problem. Thanks for watching. If you want to support us, please check the description. Thank you again, my friends. Bye and take care.